Right. Good morning, El Salvador. How you guys doing today? All right. Well, welcome. I'm very excited to be here with you guys this morning and give you guys some great talks. We got some great speakers coming up. We have Benjamin here to talk about practical merchant Bitcoin adoption. And yeah, the floor is yours. Come on up, man.
Morning, everyone, and first of all, thank you for everyone here who was out drinking last night. I know how hard it is to get up at this hour of the morning and come to a talk when you've had a bit of a big night. So I see a lot of empty seats, and that's probably all the other people who were drinking, but I know they want to see this, so I'm glad it's being recorded. All right, so my name's Ben, and I'm here to talk to you about practical merchant adoption. So first of all, who am I to talk about practical merchant adoption? I think some of you out there know me already, but for those of you who don't, my name's Ben. I've been in the Bitcoin space since 2010, so quite a while now. I run a consulting company called Bitcoiner Consulting. I've been doing that for about 5 years now, and my focus is on helping businesses, especially medium to large businesses, adopt Bitcoin into their products, services, and business workflows. I've worked for a few other companies in the space, both before and during my time as Bitcoiner Consulting. So here's a few names you might recognize. These are some companies I've spent some time working for. I also take on advisory roles to startups and other companies who are interested in expanding their abilities with Bitcoin. So two that I'm at least allowed to mention are the Satoshi Wallet and Fortress. And right now, I'm spending the majority of my time helping a company called Musket by leading up their product and engineering capabilities. And that's specifically around merchant adoption, so ties in well with this talk here. So, okay, you got a better idea of who I am, how I can talk about this stuff. So let's break this down a bit. Practical merchant adoption. What do those words mean? All three of them can be interpreted in different ways by different people. So if I say practical merchant adoption, maybe some of you have different ideas in your head about what that could actually be. So I'm going to go through each of these words in reverse order, and let's see if we can figure out what they really mean. So adoption. What is adoption? When we're talking about Bitcoin adoption, we really mean going from not doing anything with Bitcoin to doing something with Bitcoin. That's pretty much what adoption is. But different people are going to think about that in different ways. People are going to say, oh yeah, it's not real adoption if this, or it's not real adoption if that. I would say it is all adoption. It's just qualitatively different. So let's look at some of those differences. Maybe when a merchant receives some Bitcoin, they say, okay, I'm going to hodl all the Bitcoin that I receive, and because I want to have more Bitcoin. Maybe they're going to say, no, I'm going to exchange all of the Bitcoin I receive for fiat, whether that's dollars, euro, pounds, whatever. And if you look closely, by the way, that says sell. Yeah. Or maybe they're going to do a little bit of both. They're going to save some of their Bitcoin, they're going to exchange some of it. And from a purist point of view, you might say, hey, the ones who hodl are better than the ones who exchange for fiat. But you also have to remember businesses have expenses, and most of those expenses are going to be denominated and required to be paid in fiat. So it's normal that a merchant is going to want to do some combination of these things. They're going to want to hodl a bit, they're going to want to exchange a bit. So those are the kinds of things that you shouldn't be too hard on a merchant if they exchange some of their Bitcoin for fiat. It's normal. Next question then, what about holding your own keys versus having a custodian of some kind? So if a merchant holds their own keys, they have control of their Bitcoin. You have all heard, not your keys, not your coins. And a merchant, therefore, if they're not holding their keys, they're not holding their coins. But it can be complex. Different merchants have different requirements. And what about those merchants who are exchanging everything for fiat anyway? Do they actually need to even hold their own coins because they're not actually holding Bitcoin at all? They're receiving it, they're exchanging it. Why should they bother holding their own keys? So there are other questions here as well. Overall, of course, I always advise all of my clients, if you're going to be holding Bitcoin, you want to hold your own keys. You don't want to have some custodian because you don't know that that's your Bitcoin. It's at best an IOU, but there are the practical considerations to take into mind there. Another question is this accepting Bitcoin, or is it, yeah, we're accepting Bitcoin? And what I really mean by that is, imagine you walk into a hairdresser, you want a haircut, and they've got a big Bitcoin accepted here sign, and you can pay at the front desk using Bitcoin, and everything's just there. Or you walk into a different hairdresser, and there's no signage, they're not listed on any kind of services, but one of the people who cuts the hair, one of the girls who cuts the hair, takes Bitcoin from you, and then pulls cash out of her own pocket and puts it in the cash register there for her boss, because that's her way of getting more Bitcoin. That is also Bitcoin acceptance. The business doesn't accept Bitcoin, but you as a customer can certainly use your Bitcoin at that merchant. So all of those are different ways of accepting Bitcoin. So we've got kind of an idea of what adoption is. What is a merchant? So this is another question which people actually have different ideas in their head as to what it could mean. Like maybe you've got a very particular idea and you think, how could anyone think something else? Well, let's go through a couple of ideas of what different kinds of merchants are. First kind of merchant to think about is online businesses. So if I want to buy a pair of shoes online and I pay in Bitcoin, I go to their website, I select the shoes I want, I hit buy, I hit pay, I make a payment in Bitcoin of some kind, and then at some point they put the shoes in a box and they send it to me. That's buying something online. Online businesses who sell products like that generally don't have a requirement for instant payments. They can wait. So when we're talking about the difference between, for example, on-chain payments and Lightning, a business like that doesn't need to think so much about, oh, I need the instant payment of Lightning. Maybe they want it anyway for some of the other advantages. They can live with on-chain payments. Other businesses, even online ones though, however, might be providing some kind of service, like streaming video. You don't want to make an on-chain payment and then wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes even before you're allowed to watch your video. That would be ridiculous. So that's where instant payments are needed. So online businesses are one type of merchant, and they have generally some pretty good bits of software out there for supporting them and allowing them to receive Bitcoin payments, whether that's Lightning or on-chain. Another type of business to think about is the in-person shop, and this is your typical what you often think about with merchants. So this is a shop, I believe, in El Zonte, here in El Salvador. This is a shop in Dresden, a very good bakery, and this is my daughter, Sam the BTC kid. If you saw her presentation, if you didn't see her presentation yesterday, you should watch it. But this is her buying some delicious bread rolls using Bitcoin. And this is a taxi in Riga in Latvia. I actually orange-pilled this taxi on the way from the airport to my hotel when I went to Baltic Honey Badger last year. So one more taxi accepting Bitcoin, that's great. These type of merchants have different requirements than your online merchants. So these kind of merchants need it to be incredibly easy for the customer to pay in Bitcoin. They need it to be incredibly easy for the merchant to receive that Bitcoin. There can't be any complex processes where they're clicking around some kind of user interface and doing a whole lot of complex stuff. They won't do it. And of course, they need it to be instant payment. You're not going to sit in the taxi 10 minutes and wait for an on-chain payment to confirm before you're allowed to get out of the taxi. The taxi driver wants to move on, you want to get out of the taxi. So these need to be instant payments. Another type of merchant that you probably haven't really thought about before is automated merchants. Gaming machines of various kinds, so arcade machines, slot machines, vending machines that sell products. These are merchants, but they're a little bit different. They're kind of a combination of the online merchant and the in-person merchant. They have some requirements of both. So often you need some kind of instant payment. You're not going to go to a vending machine and wait 10 minutes to get the snack that you just bought. You want it to be instant. But equally, it might have some kind of more complex back-end in a similar way to an online merchant. Something a lot of people don't necessarily realize is these kinds of machines tend to have very poor connectivity. So a lot of the logic, if you're implementing Bitcoin into one of these kinds of machines, a lot of the logic actually needs to run inside the machine itself, and it's not just an interface to an online system which is doing all of the work at the back end. It's not just some kind of online system that spits out a QR code to be displayed on a panel there, and all the machine does is display the QR code. That's actually not how it works. They tend to be all inside the machine. So that's another kind of merchant. And then, last but definitely not least, enterprise customers. Enterprise merchants often run online businesses, so you've got to think about the online business. They might have some kind of group of stores which are selling things, so you're thinking about the in-person experience, and maybe, as an enterprise, they're also setting up machines of some kind, vending machines or whatever, and they're running those things. But the enterprise itself has additional requirements that a lot of the smaller, simpler operations don't. Enterprises need to have things like accounting processes, hooks into their ERP system to manage all of the complexities around handling the money. If they're a very large enterprise, they might operate in different jurisdictions around the world where there are different reporting requirements, different taxation requirements. All of these kinds of things greatly increase the complexity for enterprises. So, the last word there, practical. We know what adoption is. We know what merchants are, and I've said there's some differences and so on. But what are the real considerations we need to have for merchant adoption? So how do we turn merchant adoption into practical merchant adoption? Let's take a look at some of the issues that merchants face adopting Bitcoin. The first thing, hopefully obvious, enterprises are not the same thing as small stores, are not the same thing as online merchants. These are different kinds of things fundamentally, and you're never going to have a one-solution-fits-all approach. Often, I actually come across people who say, I've created the perfect merchant solution. Every merchant in the world can now accept Bitcoin. The problem is solved. It's over. No, it isn't. You need multiple solutions for different kinds of customers, different kinds of merchants who are going to be adopting Bitcoin and using it. I mentioned a little bit about different payments, so on-chain versus Lightning. I'd like to dig into that just a little bit to give the less technical people here perhaps an appreciation of what I'm really talking about there. An on-chain payment basically means I broadcast a transaction to the Bitcoin network, and at some point, a miner sees that. It's usually actually within a few seconds even. A miner will see that transaction. They'll put it into their mempool, so the pool of transactions that they're aware of. They'll look at how much fee is in that transaction and then decide, does this go in the next block that I mine or not? So they're building a potential new block and then trying to mine that block. If you don't pay enough fees, your transaction's not getting in. Maybe you're going to have to wait another block or another 100 blocks. Depends what the fee situation looks like at the time. So eventually it gets mined into a block, but there could be these things called reorgs, where the chain reorganizes. There were two competing chains that happened, and another block gets mined, and now all of a sudden, the one that you thought had included the block isn't actually there. Include your transaction in the block isn't actually there. So for that reason, that's complex. It takes a long time to be sure that a payment has happened. It could take, some people say wait 6 confirmations, so 6 additional blocks on top before you really trust the payment has happened. So that's like an hour of waiting. Because of that, some people said, well, okay, why don't we just say zeroconf? We'll say we accept any transaction which has appeared in the mempool, because if I submit a transaction and then I try to submit another one which spends the same inputs, it will almost always be rejected by most bits of software out there. The standard implementation of Bitcoin Core will actually reject that second transaction because it tried to spend from the same inputs as the first one. So as a merchant, why don't I just accept zeroconf transactions? It's been broadcast to the network. A miner is going to pick it up and put it in a block eventually, aren't they? Maybe. So I said, that's the way the software works. But that's not part of the Bitcoin protocol. That's not actually what Bitcoin does. That's just what the software implementations currently do. You can't trust it. So I know there are people out there, and I know there's actually some pretty big company names out there who say, yeah, zeroconf is fine. I'm standing up here disagreeing with them publicly, so feel free for them to come and fight me over it later. Don't use zeroconf. Okay. Lightning. This is, Adopting Bitcoin is a Lightning conference, and I think all of us here are aware Lightning is the way to solve these kinds of instant payment problems. Lightning is not perfect. There are definitely some issues remaining. If we wanted to onboard the entire world with Lightning right now, with the current state of Lightning, no additional changes, We couldn't. There isn't enough on-chain capacity to open all of those channels and actually have everyone using Lightning in a non-custodial way. That doesn't mean we can't do it. We can improve Lightning. We can make additional things. There are ideas like channel factories, which help a lot. There are ideas like virtual outputs whereby you create Lightning channels that could be written out to an on-chain address, but never actually are because you close them out to other channels. So there's a lot of interesting ideas around how Lightning can be improved to expand to everyone. So I think focusing on Lightning is the right approach. There are other things around Lightning as well, by the way. I think eCash is an incredibly interesting idea, and there's some great implementations out there. For those of you who know Color and his Cashew project, if you don't know it, take a look at it. It's awesome. It's interesting. But I also think those things right now are possibly the endpoints where Lightning will be everything in between. And it remains to be seen what happens with a lot of these technologies. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of potential, interesting ways of making faster payments that merchants are going to need to figure out how to adopt at some point or other going forward. And people like me as a consultant need to be on top of to be able to help them and make the right recommendations. So I said I was going to talk about some of the problems that merchants face. Let's go through a couple relatively quickly. One problem that merchants often face in the very naive implementation is slippage, so stealing by cashiers or waiters or whatever. In the very simplest version of Bitcoin adoption you can have, a merchant installs a wallet on their phone. Okay, that's it. We're finished. We've adopted for that merchant. But installing a wallet on a phone really means anyone who has access to that phone can not only receive Bitcoin for the business, they can send Bitcoin out of the business. So simply installing a wallet isn't necessarily the greatest approach to merchant adoption because people can steal. Of course, there are plenty of great pieces of software out there which avoid that. It's actually not difficult to have a receive-only wallet, have some kind of system, whether it's Lightning or on-chain, whereby you're only able to receive from clients or from customers and not send. So another problem that people have is, especially in the hospitality industry, so restaurants and so on, splitting between the bill and tips. In some jurisdictions, it's actually a legal requirement that not only do 100% of the tips go to the person performing the service, but also actually that it is in a separate payment in some way to the bill itself. So with traditional card payments or whatever, it actually charges the card twice. It does one for the bill and one for the tip. In other jurisdictions, it's actually the exact opposite way around, and all of it, the bill and the tips, has to go in one payment, and then it gets split out. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution there, but suffice to say, it's actually purely a software implementation question here. This isn't actually a difficult thing to solve. It's just something which needs to be kept in mind in those kinds of businesses. One of the biggest problems globally that people have is the ridiculous taxation and regulation requirements around Bitcoin. And that is going to be an issue as long as we have different taxation and regulation in different parts of the world. So here in El Salvador, Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is legal tender. You don't have capital gains tax on legal tender. It's just money. The regulations are that it's money and you treat it as money. That's really easy. In Germany, where I live, for a private individual, assets, which include Bitcoin, held for over 1 year have no capital gains tax. Held for under 1 year are considered speculation and therefore do have capital gains tax. And for businesses, it's different yet again. In the United States, it's an asset and it always has capital gains tax, flat, the end. You've got to deal with it. That's not the whole story even. It gets even more complex. In Germany, everything is treated on a first-in, first-out basis. So, if you receive some Bitcoin and then send some Bitcoin, your Bitcoin pool is treated as one thing. In some other jurisdictions, however, it's by UTXO. So individual UTXOs on the chain are considered to be the individual things that are being measured with regards to the payments. How does that work with Lightning? Because with Lightning, your individual UTXOs aren't the payments. You don't have a new UTXO for each payment which happens. So tax jurisdictions which say that. How does it work? I honestly don't know. I'm not a tax consultant. I don't want to be a tax consultant. But those are the kinds of problems that are being faced out there. There's just unclear regulations. Another question is this speculation versus currency? In the Australian tax code, it actually says that assets such as Bitcoin, which are used for speculative purposes, have capital gains tax. However, assets such as Bitcoin, which are used as currency, do not have capital gains tax. How do you prove that? This was me using it as currency, this was me speculating. It's ridiculous. So obviously this just makes everyone go, what the is going on? This is hard, this is not easy, and this is why I, as a technical consultant, will work with other consultants who understand this stuff better than I do in order to really help people make these choices. So if you ever go out and want to help merchants, keep in mind this is complex. This is a difficult part. One of the other big things that people talk about, now we're going to focus on Lightning specifically, is Lightning liquidity. So you can often think of Lightning channels as like an abacus. If I push all of the beads of an abacus over to this side, I can't push any more this way because there are none over on this side. Same thing with a Lightning channel. If I am a merchant and I open a channel to somebody else, all of the money is on my side of the channel, which means I can't receive on that channel until I've spent on it first. So I need to send money out on that channel before I can receive anything. For a merchant, this is obviously less than ideal. You want to have it the other way around. You want all of the money on the other side of the channel so that you can receive as much as possible. This seems like it gets more complex when you then talk, okay, I want to do my liquidity management, and I want some of my money in fiat, and I want to hodl some of it. What do I do? What do I do? So you get a submarine. Possibly a submarine swap, using something like the Loop product from Lightning Labs or Bolts. There are plenty of other services out there. These are just two of the big, very well-known ones, so I thought I'd mention them. What is a submarine swap? A submarine swap allows you to push money out over one channel and receive over a different method, such as push out over Lightning and receive on-chain in a trustless manner. So essentially, it's got cryptographic assurity that you're not going to have the funds stolen from you or something in the process. What that then allows you to do is basically say, okay, I'm going to push out all of those beads, all the funds on my Lightning channel, either directly to my cold storage or to an exchange where I'm going to transfer it into fiat. And I've balanced my channels in the process of doing so. So Lightning swaps, submarine swaps, are basically the main way that merchants do channel rebalancing overall with Lightning. Another problem merchants have is, how do you find me? I'm a merchant, I accept Bitcoin. How do my customers know I accept Bitcoin? I can put signs up, that kind of thing. There are some great services out there, and I actually just specifically wanted to shout one out called btcmap.org. If you don't know BTC Map, take a look, use it. It's an incredible service which basically is based on OpenStreetMaps and lets you find businesses that accept Bitcoin. If you know any businesses that accept Bitcoin which aren't on BTC Map, you can add them yourself because it's an OpenStreetMap based thing. It's an open system. So btcmap.org, highly, highly recommend it. The last big problem I really want to talk about with merchant adoption is how hard it is. And for this one, I want to tell you a little story. A little while ago, my daughter, who's sitting here in the front row, by the way, was interviewed on What Bitcoin Did by Peter McCormick. He flew us over to London for it. And in London, we went out for dinner at a place called Heba Express. Really nice restaurant, Iranian food, I think it was. But really excellent food. And they accept Bitcoin. They've got a Bitcoin accepted here sticker on the door. Very simple, straightforward. And I went in and I said, yeah, we'd like to pay in Bitcoin. And the guy said, yeah, okay, I'll need to go get the terminal out the back. From out the back. It should be okay. It should be no problem. And then we sat down, we ordered our food, we ate our food, it was great. I went up to pay, and he said, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you wanted to pay in Bitcoin. Okay, I'll go get the terminal and see if it's working. So he goes out, gets the terminal, comes back. Thankfully, everything worked. But was that a smooth interaction? Was that easy for him? You can very much imagine that was an inconvenience. That was this difficult thing for him. So Bitcoin acceptance needs to be easy. any solution that a merchant adopts has to be as simple as their existing solutions or simpler. The absolute perfect ideal, and we're not there yet, would be some kind of terminal where you just say, okay, that'll be this amount of money, and then either somebody pays in Bitcoin or taps a tap and pay card, or even uses a tap signer type thing. Whatever it is, they can just pay. Whether they're paying in Bitcoin or fiat doesn't matter. That would be the ideal solution, and we're not there yet, but that is the goal, I think, for a lot of the merchant service providers out there. So who are some of those merchant service providers? Here's a few names. There are a lot more. I'm not trying to favoritize anyone by putting, by missing out names or whatever on this screen. So, if you work for such a provider out there and I'm missing your name, I'm sorry. But I do want to highlight a couple that I really, really like. So BTC Pay Server, open source software, absolutely brilliant. It is not only great for online, but you can also actually use it in in-person environments as well. BTC Pay Server is just so easy to use, so easy to set up. It's got hosted versions. You can run it yourself if you want. If you don't want to use the hosted version, it's really great. Fortress, one of my clients I mentioned earlier, they make enterprise solutions. So you want to hook in Bitcoin into an enterprise and have proper management over Bitcoin in an enterprise environment with connections to ERPs and so on and so on. That's where Fortress comes into things. Swiss Bitcoin Pay is pretty well known. They provide a fairly easy merchant terminal. IBEX Pay, part of IBEX, which big service. They provide a lot of interesting capabilities. And of course, my current main role, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing some work with Musket, who are going to be making also what I would call premium, high-quality merchant services for in-person payments, and solving a lot of the kinds of problems that I've been talking about in this presentation. So that's pretty much it. The last thing to really just hammer home is you need to understand what the problem is if you're going to solve the problem. I don't have solutions. I don't have a solution to every problem that every merchant could have, but these are the kinds of things that I spend my time thinking about. So I would really appreciate, if you have any extra solutions, if you have any problems you think I haven't talked about and you would like me to help you solve and say, what about this? What about that? How do I deal with this? Feel free to reach out to me. Here's me on pretty much all the major platforms out there. Nostr at the bottom, probably easier to scan the QR code than type in that whole InPub. But yeah, bitcoinerconsulting.com is my address, and I'm available. Thank you very much for your time. I hope all of you have enjoyed hearing a bit about merchant adoption.